Hello fellow food lovers. Today I will be making Chinese pork and lotus root soup. You will need 1 pound of pork bones, 3 medium lotus root bulbs, 5 pieces of dried scallop, also called conpoy, half a cup of dried black-eyed peas, 4 pieces of dried tangerine peel, 1 medium piece of ginger, and salt. Okay, so I have about a pound of pork bones here. They're fairly meaty. The best pork bones I find for making soup is pork neck bones. They're quite meaty, and at the end when the soup's done, you can actually fish those bones out and put a bit of soy sauce on them, and they're quite enjoyable to eat. I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother would make soup and she'd fish out the pork neck bones and pour a bit of soy sauce on them and give it to me and my brother. It could be almost like a meal in itself. So the first thing you do with Cantonese soup making is you want to blanch the pork bones in water before you make the final soup. So I gave the bones a quick wash under the tap, and then I put it in a pot. So I'm using a pressure cooker, and then I fill it with just enough water to cover the bones. Okay, so while that's on the stove coming to a boil, I'm going to prep the rest of the ingredients. So I have a piece of ginger. You don't need to skin it. I'm just cutting into big thick slices because it's just going to flavor the soup. It's not for eating or anything like that. So if you cut it into big thick slices, you're sure not to eat it when it's in your soup. Okay. You also use, you're going to need 4 pieces of dried tangerine peel. That's what a dried tangerine peel looks like. You can get it in a Chinese grocery store. It's a common ingredient in Chinese soup making, or at least in Cantonese soup making. Some people make their own dried tangerine peels. When they eat a tangerine, they'll kind of string it on a string and they'll hang it in the window or outside and let it dry. And you could do it that way. It's probably easier just to buy it in the store though. So that's, yeah, a couple of slices of ginger, thick slices, and 4 pieces of tangerine peel. So this is dried scallop or conpoy. You can also get this in a Chinese or an Asian grocery store. They're fairly expensive, so that's 1 piece right there. So in some grocery stores, you can end up paying $1 per piece. These ones I actually made myself. It's a lot cheaper if you make your own. So I'm probably going to do an upcoming video showing how to make dried scallop. So it's more than anything used as a flavoring ingredient for soups or stir fries. Okay, so we're going to need 3 medium lotus root bulbs. So when you make lotus root soup, you can actually cut it into quite thick slices. It's going to be boiled for quite a long time, so the lotus root is not going to be crunchy like you would find in a stir fry. It's actually going to be quite soft. So I like to cut it into slices, but there's different ways of cutting lotus root. You can cut it across and into like little bricks or whatever, but I think the prettiest way is just to cut into slices so you can see the kind of shape of the inside of the lotus root. So we're going to cut 3 of those into slices, 3 medium bulbs. So I like to give it a wash before I peel it using the vegetable peeler, and then I'll cut both ends off and then I'll slice it. So generally with Chinese, or especially with Cantonese soups, they'll use pork bones predominantly and also chicken bones. Usually when it's just chicken bones they use for making soup stock, that's what they would use for making noodle soup. Okay, so there you have it. I have the pot with water and the pork bones. So what I did was I brought it to a boil and I boiled 5-10 minutes just to get the impurities out of the pork bones. That's the traditional way of making soup in Cantonese cooking. And then you dump the water and then you fill it with fresh water to make the soup stock. So for the soup, for about 1 pound of pork bones, I'm going to put about 4 liters of water in there. That's a fairly large pressure cooker, by the way. Yeah, so 4 liters of water in there with the pork bones. And then I'm going to season it with about a tablespoon of salt. Okay, as you can see, the fresh water that I replaced has come to a boil. So once that's done, when it's come to a boil, I can put the lid on now for the pressure cooker, and then it should pressurize quite quickly. Once it's come up to pressure and you lift that little knob on top and steam comes out, you know it's pressurizing, and you can turn the heat down. So after it's pressurized, I'll turn the heat down to between medium and low. And then I'll cook it for about maybe an hour using the pressure cooker on between medium and low heat. So there it is. If you're using a stock pot, instead of an hour in the pressure cooker, you can cook it in the stock pot, the bones, for about 2 hours. First bringing it up to a boil and then turning it down to medium. But if you use a stock pot, you're going to have to watch it carefully and making sure that you have to add water when it gets low. Okay, so I'm adding the rest of the ingredients now. So I added the ginger. Oh yeah, and there's also 1/2 cup of black-eyed peas that I add into there. So it's just dried. Don't soak it or anything. It's just 1/2 cup of dried black-eyed peas, the lotus root, the ginger, the 4 pieces of tangerine peel, and the 5 pieces of dried scallop. Okay, I'll give it a stir, and then when it comes up to a boil again, I'm going to put the lid on and I'm going to pressure cook it for probably half an hour. And half an hour should be enough. If you check after half an hour and say the black-eyed peas are still hard, then cook it for another half hour in the pressure cooker. So maybe with the new ingredients, between half to an hour total time. If you're using a stock pot, after 2 hours of cooking just the bones and you add the new ingredients, you can use a stock pot and cook it for another hour to an hour and a half. This kind of soup, the lotus root and pork soup, is what the Cantonese call an old fire soup. Low for old fire. And that basically means that it's been boiling for a long, long time, as opposed to a quick soup like an egg drop soup, which is something that you make in 5-10 minutes. So yeah, I was saying before, chicken bones are usually used to make stock for noodle soups, but for soups that you eat with dinner, like this one, basically it's pork bones and chicken bones. Okay, bon appetit.